They say that each of us is a book. My book isn't finished yet, but there are already chapters in it that I want to share. Hi, my name is Jacob, and here are the first lines of my story. The flickering blue light of my work phone screen cast long, dancing shadows on my bedroom wall. It was late, the house was silent, and the only sound was the soft hum of the air conditioner. My wife was out, and I was hunched over the phone, my heart a frantic drum against my ribs. I had done something I never thought I was capable of. I had linked her WhatsApp account to my work phone, a desperate, craven act born of a knowing suspicion that had been festering in my gut for weeks. It was a violation of trust, a betrayal in its own right, and I hated myself for it. But I had to know. The quiet questions that had been haunting me had become a loud, insistent roar, and I couldn't ignore them anymore. The screen was a window into her world, a world I was starting to realize I didn't fully know. That night, she sent just one message. My stomach twisted with a sickening dread as I watched the little clock icon next to the message, waiting for him to read it. But he never did. The clock stayed there, a silent testament to a conversation that was waiting to happen. She deleted it early the next day, a small, subtle act that felt like a loud, screaming confession. She was hiding something. The dread turned to a cold, hard certainty. It wasn't until later the next night that he finally messaged her. My heart skipped a beat every time a new message appeared, a series of short, innocent-looking texts that seemed to be nothing more than a friendly chat. But my intuition, the same one that had led me to this dark place, was screaming at me. I watched the last message pop up, a line of text that didn't even fit on the screen. I didn't need to open it. The first line was enough. It was sexual. It was crude. It was a confirmation of my worst fears. He wanted to do things to her, things that were not a part of a friendly chat. She read it. She deleted it. And all the chats from that night were gone. She was a ghost in her own life, a woman with a hidden world I had just stumbled upon. The few days that followed were a blur of internal turmoil. We had a city break planned, a trip that was supposed to be a chance for us to reconnect. But all I could think about was the chat. The anger, the pain, the betrayal, it all festered inside of me. I wanted to confront her, but the setting felt wrong. I couldn't have this conversation in a foreign city, in a strange hotel room. But I couldn't hold it in either. The pressure was building, a silent, internal scream that was threatening to tear me apart. The moment came as it always does when I least expected it. I had a few too many drinks. The liquid courage loosened my tongue, and the filter I had been so carefully maintaining finally broke. She was in the shower, and I just blurted it out. I told her I knew about the chats. The words hung in the air, a final, irrevocable act. She came out of the shower, her hair wrapped in a towel, her face a mask of shock and defensiveness. She said he was just an old friend. She said she had never cheated on me, but she admitted she could have. The words were a knife in my gut. The admission of possibility was just as painful as a full confession. I told her I now had doubts about everything, about the times she went out with her friends, about the times she went to the gym. The places and people that had once been a normal part of our lives were now tainted with suspicion. We said a lot of things we didn't mean, a storm of angry words and accusations. She told me to wait until we got home, that she wasn't going to have this conversation in a strange city. And so, the subject was dropped. The silence that followed was even more tense than the fight. We were in the same room, but we were miles apart, two strangers living in the same space. The day we got back, we were going to talk, but life got in the way. We ended up going out with the family, and the conversation never happened. It was a postponement of the inevitable, a delay of the pain I knew was coming. It wasn't until later that week that I finally asked her if we were going to be all right. Her answer, a simple, "I don't know," was a blow to the gut. The finality of those 3 words, the quiet desperation in her voice, it was more painful than any fight. This was a dance we had done so many times before. We would fight, we wouldn't get on, we would patch things up for a while, we would say we'll make changes, but we never did. It was a rinse and repeat cycle that had defined our marriage for years. But this time was different. The chats were the new element, the new betrayal that had changed the entire dynamic of our relationship. She finally opened up to me, a quiet, vulnerable confession that surprised me. She told me she was lonely, even in a house full of people. Our children, now older, rarely came out of their rooms. I sat on a separate couch, lost in my own world. She felt taken for granted, ignored. The pain in her voice was real. I could feel her loneliness, The quiet desperation of a woman who felt invisible in her own home. But we didn't talk about the chats then. We went to bed, the unspoken words hanging in the air between us. The next morning, I was up early for work. She sent me a text asking how I was. I told her the truth. I had never felt so down, so hurt. The thought of our marriage ending was a crushing weight on my soul. We made plans to go out the following Saturday, to finally talk things out. For a few days everything was fine. A fragile truce had been called. But then she sent a picture of the gym, a simple, innocent-looking text that threw me back into a vortex of suspicion and doubt. The gym. The place I had so many questions about. The place that was now tainted with the memory of her lies. When she came back from the gym, I was tidying up. The kids were playing in the backyard, their laughter a dissonant counterpoint to the storm in my head. I couldn't take it anymore. I shouted at them to be quiet, a sharp, angry command that made them fall silent. I knew I had to get out of the house. I went for a walk, leaving my phone behind, desperate for some air, some space, some time to clear my head. The next few weeks were a roller coaster of emotions. I would be okay for a few days. A fragile sense of normalcy would return, and then it would hit me again. The chats. The thought of her talking to another man, of him saying those things to her, of her deleting the evidence. It all came crashing down on me. Then, WhatsApp updated, and I was logged out of her account. It was a small, technical detail, but it felt like a final, definitive cut. The last link to her secret world was gone. I was blind again. Even though he hadn't been in contact, even though she had blocked him, the feeling of not knowing, of being on the outside, was unbearable. And then she changed her passcode to her phone. It was a final, undeniable act of defiance. I had told her that I wouldn't be able to trust her if she did that, but she did it anyway. We had another talk, but it was just another iteration of the same old argument. She thought we had moved on, but I told her it wasn't that easy. Every time a WhatsApp notification pinged on her phone, my heart skipped a beat, and not in a good way. I felt like every time I left the room, she was on her phone, talking to someone, hiding something. She ended up deleting the app and reinstalling it, but that only made things worse. All the chats were gone, even the ones with our kids. It was a gesture of desperation, a clumsy attempt to erase the evidence, but it only served to confirm my deepest fears. One Sunday I asked her why she had changed her password. Our voices were raised. She wanted to know why I wanted to access her phone. The old defensiveness, the old anger, it was all back. She threatened to cancel a keep-fit course she had previously booked. A small act of self-sabotage that felt like a direct attack on our marriage. I told her to go, to not let our problems get in the way of her own happiness. I had kept a note on my phone, a diary of my feelings since I found the chats. I went over them, a painful, self-flagellating exercise. And then, I just decided to freak out. I left my phone at home and went for a walk, a desperate act of rebellion, a quiet plea for her to notice me, to notice my pain. When she came back, she found my phone. She read my notes, the raw, unfiltered confession of my hurt and my desperation. She was worried about the last message, the one that ended in a cry of hopelessness. She called and texted, but my work phone, the one I had with me, was set up not to show messages or phone calls. She came looking for me, and she found me in a pub. She saw me, a flicker of relief in her eyes, and then she left. She had thought I was in a field somewhere, had gone to some dark place in her mind. I told her later that I would never do that I would never leave her in that way. That night, I decided I couldn't go on like this. I needed an answer. I needed the full story. I told her that if I didn't get one, it was over. The next few days were excruciating. I gave her one-word answers, my silence a weapon, a form of emotional blackmail. I was pushing her to the edge, forcing her to make a choice. Finally, I sent her a message. I need to know everything. She replied, "You sure you want this at work?" And I said yes. It didn't happen then, but it happened later that night. We went to a local park, the darkness a welcome cloak for the conversation we were about to have. She had it all typed out on her phone. She handed it to me and left, giving me the privacy I needed to read it. Before she walked away, she said, "Nothing happened." The story unfolded in my hands, a painful narrative of a lonely woman on holiday, of a chance meeting with a man who had things in common with her. She had been working from home since COVID, a life of isolation that had left her craving human connection. She said there was an attraction, a flicker of something new and exciting, but that his final message, the sexual one, had ruined it. It was a friendship for her, but for him, it was something more. She had panicked when I confronted her, The lie of him being an old friend, a desperate attempt to protect herself. She ended the text with a final, heartbreaking admission. This will probably be the end of the marriage. When I finished reading it, a sense of immense relief washed over me. Everything was out. The lie was gone. The truth, as painful as it was finally ours to share. When I went to find her, I handed her back her phone. And then, as a joke, I gave her my wedding ring. She burst out crying, a broken, crumpled mess. I hugged her and said I was sorry for the stupid joke. We talked and we ironed out a few things. We realized he lived in a different country in the UK, a few hundred miles away. The idea of him wanting to meet for drinks was a ridiculous, impossible thought. It was a small detail, but it was enough to make me laugh, to realize the absurdity of the situation. The next Saturday, we went out for food and drinks. It was one of the best days we had had in a long time. We not only talked, but we had conversations, real, honest, and open conversations. We stayed at the table for 2 hours after we finished eating, talking and drinking, something we had never done before. We went to a few other pubs, and the night was filled with laughter and a renewed sense of hope. It was a new beginning, a new chapter for our relationship. We now have date nights every Saturday, if we can find a babysitter for our youngest. If not, we go to the cinema with him, just to spend time together. We've been on 3 holidays this year and to a few concerts, all things we would never have done before. It's been a good 6 months, not without our disagreements, but nothing major. The anger, the pain, the suspicion, it's all gone now, replaced by a quiet sense of peace and a renewed love for the woman who I was so close to losing. There were so many things I had to leave out, so many small details that would have made this a much longer story. The conversations with my wife about the hidden WhatsApp account, the small steps we took to rebuild our trust, the painful confessions that were only made when we were finally able to talk openly and honestly. But the final takeaway was this: we faced our demons, we confronted our past, and we chose to fight for a future that was built on honesty, on trust, and on a love that was strong enough to overcome even the deepest of betrayals. The silence in our house, which had once felt heavy with unspoken words and festering resentments, now felt comfortable and full. It was a quiet that was earned, a peace that was hard-won. The memory of that week, of my coldness, my one-word answers, my desperate plea for a full confession. It was a painful memory, but it was also a necessary one. It was the catalyst that had finally forced us to confront the elephant in the room, the lie that had been a silent companion in our marriage for so long. That final conversation in the park was not just a confession, it was a release. When she handed me her phone, a small, black object that held the key to all my pain, I felt an immense sense of relief. The weight I had been carrying for weeks, the crushing burden of suspicion and doubt, was finally lifted. The truth, no matter how difficult, was always going to be easier to bear than the lie. When I read her typed-out confession, my mind started to work, piece by piece, to make sense of the narrative. The little details, the parts of her story that I had questioned before, now fell into place. The need for connection, the loneliness she felt, the frustration of a marriage that had become a routine of silence and distance, it all made sense. I was not a blameless victim in this story. My own actions, my own emotional distance, had contributed to her sense of isolation. I had to acknowledge my part in this, to take ownership of my own failings. It was a difficult but necessary step towards healing. The most shocking part of her confession was the detail about his final message. The idea that he wanted to meet up, to do those things to her, felt so violating. But her reaction, her disgust, and her immediate sense of regret was what gave me a sense of peace. She had not reciprocated his desire. She had not acted on the possibility of a physical affair. It was a friendship for her, a connection that had blossomed from a place of loneliness and a need for attention. The fact that his desires had been a betrayal of her trust, and not just mine, was a crucial part of the story. It wasn't about her desire for him. It was about his desire for her, a desire she had not shared. When I went to find her after reading the note, my heart was no longer filled with anger, but with a quiet, overwhelming sadness. The sight of her, waiting for me, her face a mask of fear and uncertainty, broke my heart. When I handed her back her phone, the gesture was not one of accusation, but of a quiet, unspoken understanding. And when I gave her my wedding ring, it was a test, a stupid joke born out of a desperate need to feel some sense of control over a situation that had felt so out of control. Her reaction, her tears, her quiet understanding of the symbolism was a sign that we were finally on the same page. The ring, which had felt like a shackle for so long, was now a symbol of our renewed commitment, a testament to our ability to overcome the challenges we faced. The date night we had that Saturday was more than just a dinner and drinks. It was a ritual, a sacred act of reconnection. The conversation flowed easily, naturally, a river of words that had been dammed up for so long. We talked about our kids, our work, our dreams, our fears. We laughed. We held hands. We looked at each other, not with suspicion, but with a quiet, honest love. It was a love that was different now, a love that was more mature, more grounded, more real. It was a love that had been tested in the fire of betrayal and had come out stronger on the other side. The months that followed were a testament to our newfound honesty. We talked about the small things, the little annoyances that would have once festered and led to a full-blown fight. We talked about our kids' lives, about their struggles and their triumphs. We talked about our work, about our hopes and our frustrations. We were no longer two people living in the same house. We were a team, a partnership, a unit. My wife's proactive efforts were a quiet, constant reassurance. She would tell me when she was going out with her friends, not as a confession, but as a simple, open exchange of information. She would talk to me about the men at her work, not in a defensive way, but in a casual, open way, as if there was nothing to hide. These were small things, but they were monumental. They were a sign of her willingness to change, her willingness to rebuild the trust she had so carelessly broken. I had to work on myself, too. I had to let go of the anger and the resentment. I had to forgive her, not because she deserved it, but because I deserved peace. I had to learn to trust her again, not blindly, but with a quiet, conscious effort. It was a process, a daily practice, and a quiet act of love. I had to learn to look at her and see not just the woman who had betrayed me, but the woman who was fighting for our marriage, the woman who was willing to do whatever it took to make things right. The road ahead was long, and I knew there would be bumps along the way. There would be moments of doubt, moments of pain, moments when the old fears would resurface. But we were no longer walking alone. We were walking together, two people who had faced their demons and had chosen to fight for a future that was built on honesty, on trust, and on a love that was strong enough to overcome even the deepest of betrayals. The shame I had felt, the embarrassment, it was all starting to fade. It was being replaced by a sense of quiet pride. We were a work in progress, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the resilience of the human heart. And that, I realized, was a story worth telling, a story worth fighting for. The 6 months that had passed since that night in the park felt like a lifetime. We were a different couple now, a new version of ourselves that was more honest, more vulnerable, and more in love than we had been in years. The quiet hum of our home was no longer a symbol of our emotional distance, but a testament to our newfound peace. We had survived the storm, and we had emerged stronger on the other side. I found myself thinking about the other man, the one who had started this whole chain of events. He was just a random person, a stranger from a different country, a temporary blip in our long and complicated history. He was a catalyst, a necessary evil that had forced us to confront the issues we had been ignoring for so long. Without him, we would have continued on the same destructive path, two people living separate lives under the same roof. The lie would have continued to fester, and our marriage would have slowly but surely died a quiet, lonely death. I didn't hate him anymore. I was almost grateful for him, for the role he had played in our story, for the part he had played in our salvation. Our date nights became a cherished ritual, a sacred time for us to reconnect. We would dress up, go to a nice restaurant, and talk for hours. We would talk about the future, about our plans to travel, about our dreams for our children. We were no longer talking about our problems, we were talking about our life, our shared vision for the future. It was a beautiful, inspiring conversation, a conversation that filled me with a sense of purpose and hope. The concerts we went to were a new experience for us. We had always liked the same music, but we had never gone to a concert together. We would stand in the crowd, her hand in mine, singing along to our favorite songs. The music, the energy, the shared experience, it was a powerful symbol of our new love. It was a love that was no longer just about raising a family and paying the bills. It was a love that was about joy, about adventure, about living life to the fullest. Our holidays were no longer just a chance to escape from our lives, they were a chance to live. We would explore new cities, try new foods, and create new memories. We would laugh, we would argue, we would make up. We were a real couple again, a couple that was not afraid to be imperfect, to be messy, to be human. The disagreements we had were no longer major. They were small, insignificant bumps in the road. We would talk about them openly, honestly, and without defensiveness. We had a new rule: no more secrets, no more half-truths, no more lies. The truth, we had learned, was the only thing that could set us free. I had come to terms with my own anxious attachment, my own need for control. I had learned to trust her, not just with her phone, but with her heart. I had learned to let go of the anger, the pain, the suspicion. I had learned to forgive. It was a long, painful journey, but it was a journey that was worth every step. Our marriage was not perfect. It was a work in progress, a testament to our ability to overcome the challenges we faced. But it was a marriage that was built on a foundation of honesty, on a love that was more mature, more grounded, and more real than anything I had ever known before. And for the first time in a long time, I felt a deep sense of peace, a quiet sense of pride in the man I had become, and the love we had created. The story of our marriage was no longer a story of betrayal and lies. It was a story of a couple who had faced their demons, who had confronted their past, and who had chosen to fight for a future that was built on honesty, on trust, and on a love that was strong enough to overcome even the deepest of betrayals. The shame I had felt, the embarrassment, it was all gone. It was replaced by a sense of quiet pride. We were a work in progress, a testament to the power of forgiveness and the resilience of the human heart. And that, I realized, was a story worth telling, a story worth fighting for.